In part 1, we discussed how the Tyre prophecy of Ezekiel 26 needs to be viewed in terms of pronoun pairings, so that we properly understand what portions were meant to be fulfilled by Nebuchadnezzar and what portions were not. Now in this second and last part, it's time to go over it line by line and ask whether or not each portion was fulfilled. This one's pretty simple and not often disputed. It's said that many nations will come against Tyre. A lot of apologetics efforts think that's fulfilled by the attacks on Tyre by Babylon, Alexander the Great, and parties as late as the Muslim Crusaders. But I think we don't need to go that far. Nebuchadnezzar's Babylon was the first of the nations to come against Tyre, but Alexander's forces were put together from a coalition of Greek city-states. Each of these was an independent entity and acted as a nation unto itself. Alexander was also joined by some other nations besides his Greek friends. He didn't have his own navy, so he picked up some help from some other nations. Add it all up and you get about a dozen different nations, and you don't even need the Muslim Crusaders. This one's also easy. Few would dispute that Alexander fulfilled this verse. By way of explanation, the city of Tyre was actually composed of two parts: a mainland settlement and the settlement out on the island. Nebuchadnezzar started the ball rolling by destroying the mainland settlement. Alexander got himself all clever and attacked the island city by taking the remains of the mainland settlement and making a bridge out of it. So there you have that one, clean as a whistle. Or rather, clean as the top of a rock. The spoil to the nations part is pretty obviously fulfilled as a normal part of war. The spreading of fishnets? Well, direct evidence for such private actions of peasant fishermen isn't really documented. But I think we can agree it's not unreasonable to suppose these guys spread their nets in the area of the ruins, right? We don't need to discuss these too much. Few doubt that these reflect accurately what Nebuchadnezzar did or could have done to the mainland city. As we talked about before, this is an example of a they-I pairing, indicating that the nations will do these things, which would allow that Babylon or any other nation could fulfill these passages. Here, though, Alexander is the only one who made a spoil of Tyre. Nebuchadnezzar didn't get a lot of booty from the mainland city, which is reported in Ezekiel 29. You might say the mainland part was the poor side of the equation, while the island city was where all the good stuff was. Now, what about built no more? This is where a lot of fundy atheists see a failure point. They'll point to how the city of Tyre has been rebuilt, and how it stands even to this day. Well, a couple of points on that. First of all, it's a little silly to make an identification between the city of Tyre as Ezekiel saw it, and, for example, the modern city of Tyre. Tyre in Ezekiel's day was an independent nation, a city-state which was a world power of the time. The modern city is just a major city in Lebanon. The only thing they really have in common is the name and the location. But then again, what about older versions of Tyre even back in the BC era, past the time of Alexander? Well, to discuss that, I'd like to bring in a special guest. This is Pharaoh Ramses III of Egypt. What's he got to do with anything? Well, let me ask him a question to show you. Hey Pharaoh, tell us about one of your recent battles.
I slew the Denyen in their islands, while the Jeker and the Philistines were made ashes. The Shurden and the Washesh of the sea were made non-existent, captured altogether and brought on captivity to Egypt like the sands of the shore.
Hold on a minute. You speak of the Shurden and Washesh being made non-existent, but then you go on to say they were captured. Which is it? Here's the clue, folks. There are a lot of examples of this sort of thing in ancient records. You could call it trash talk. You can read about a leader saying this or that enemy was made non-existent, when it's pretty obvious that that's not literally true. The same thing goes here for when Ezekiel says Tyre will be built no more. If you look at that and at what follows it, what you see is a whole lot of trash talking. So the bottom line, Ezekiel isn't predicting a permanent destruction of Tyre. He uses the ancient metaphors of war to describe the seriousness of Tyre's predicament. Piece of cake. And with that, we'll see you next time.